This is KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank.
Welcome into another 3 Mile Pod. I am your host, Cole Manbeck, joined as always by publisher and editor at K-State Online on the On3 platform. Derek Young is with us as we are to talk more transfer portal news, more developments. It's the gift that keeps on giving and taking away as Kansas State's Arthur Kaluma entered the transfer portal on Tuesday night, a news that came as a bit of a surprise to me, probably to DY as well. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk a little bit more about transfer portal updates on the basketball front, and we're also going to discuss some major additions on the football front on top of what Dylan Edwards' commitment in terms of Alex Marenko committing a talented linebacker transfer, Malcolm Alcorn Crowder back in the mix at Kansas State, and others as well, and also a high school commitment. So tons of commitment news on the football front, and then we'll talk basketball here to lead things off. But first, as always, get stocked up with Holiday Distillery, 360 Vodka. Go get your Ben Holiday Bottled and Bond Bourbon. That's my style. I have numerous bottles of Ben Holiday Bottled and Bond Bourbon in my basement bar. My neighbors all love Ben Holiday Bottled and Bond Bourbon. Holiday Distillery threw an amazing draft party on Sunday for us at KCSN. And for our listeners as well, they've thrown multiple tailgates for us at K-State football games. They've got multiple tailgates planned for this season, more to come on that. We're going to have a heck of a time with a lot of you that are able to make it to a couple of K-State football games. So get out to Holiday Distillery or go to your local liquor store, pick up some Ben Holiday Bottled and Bond Bourbon or 360 Vodka and support them as they support us on 3MA. All right, DY, let's dive in. More news that came last night. I'm telling you what. There is a trend, DY, that you should start to follow. I made a joke last night to one of my friends that, hey, I'm going to be unavailable during baseball practice between around 5:30 to 7:30 for Brody. Shit. No, I shouldn't say shit. Shit always blows up when I go to Brody's baseball practice on Tuesday nights at that time window. I said to him, something's going to happen. And that's what happened last night during practice. It's 3 straight weeks something has happened while I was there. And so Arthur Kaluma, who we knew was going through the pre-draft process, had entered the NBA draft. I think you and I both had maybe a slight lean to thinking he would probably be back at Kansas State and on the roster for the 24-25 season, announced that he is actually entering the transfer portal on top of going through the NBA draft process. So Arthur Kaluma is gone, marking the 7th transfer to leave the team since the start of the offseason. DY, what do you make of this one?
Yeah, ironically, I have an engagement on Tuesday nights at about that same time from 6 to 7:45, so it could be me as well, because I started taking a class. But this one surprised mildly, because I think we were all like, I was confident he wouldn't go to NBA. That at least that's what I was under the impression of. So yeah, I would say I'm having a hard time wrapping my round around the amount of surprise I have, and it's not really good podcasting. But what I will say is, like, I was pretty confident that he was returning to school. I'd actually written something an hour or two right before he went and made this announcement, or this announcement became public. So kind of made me look silly. I said him returning to school was the leader in the clubhouse. I guess technically that's right. Just don't know which school at this point.
Well, I mean, look, the odds are he's not getting drafted. You look at the mock draft sites and all the projections and the rankings from experts, it's probably not going to be taken in the top 60 unless he blows people away in workouts. He could. So it's, more than likely that he returns to school. And I think that was our thought process, but he decided to enter the portal at the very last time frame available as the portal closes today on May 1st. So he entered on April 30th, right before that transfer portal deadline window closes. DY, it's the 7th transfer, as I said, since the start of the offseason. Is that a reason to be concerned for the staff in terms of losing that many guys?
I don't think so. I mean, everyone's struggling with this. There's a tough balancing act because there's 2 or 3 things at play. One being the unfiltered, unregulated transfer portal that you can hop in at any time. while that window was open, and the window's open for quite a long time. They probably need to shrink it even more, in my opinion. So that's an escape hatch for anyone. And the fact that you can do it so many times, it's just easy, right? Because not that I think it was okay, because there needs to be a middle ground found, but the archaic transfer rules where you had to sit out a year if you did it, right? Even the first time, probably not fair to the athlete when considering the coach movement. But now we probably flipped too far to the extreme the other way, and there needs to be a middle ground found. But what I will say is, what that prevented, now that sit out a year, even for the first time, like I said, unfair, and it's probably that's not something that'll ever come back. But what it did is, if someone had a bad day, like, they weren't just going to enter the transfer portal. They had to really think about the consequences, both positive and negative, of doing so. Whereas it's so easy to do now, like, there's no thought process of it. So that's part of it. The other part is the NIL stuff. Every kid has, probably 100 voices in their head telling them what they should or should not do at this point. And there's only a few that are probably speaking in their best interest, let's be real. And sometimes you end up listening to the wrong person that says, you can get this amount of money somewhere, where that's probably not the actual truth of the matter. So I think that there's some misconceptions and some falsehoods out there that these 19 to 22-year-olds start to believe, and contributes to their decision that's probably not in their best interest. Because we see it out there. There's a lot of NIL rumors that aren't necessarily real, right? Of how much you can go get, what the going rate is. I mean, there was Jeremy Roach shot his down. Someone was saying already, he was getting $1.3 million from Baylor. Not true. He's not getting that much. If there's anyone getting that much, it's probably on one hand. That's just the truth of the matter. So it being this way, it being so unstable, is a contributing factor. And I don't know if there's a coach in America that can really fight against those two things. It's really, really tough to do. And someone just posted on KSO a little chart, and him. It's actually Parker Eaves that also posted on, I think, on our Patreon and our Discord. But Kansas State has 8 players now, because they've lost 7 to the portal, but they've gotten 4, right? So they have, I think, 8 on the current roster. And everyone's like, man, that's 5 spots to fill in they feel like a short amount of time. Because Coach Tang, to be fair, had put it out there that he wants to get his roster finalized sooner rather than later this time around, because he thinks there's a benefit to that. So people are using that. But I'm looking through this. Okay, Kansas State has 8 players. Baylor is 9.
Yeah.
BYU is 9. K-State is 8. Oklahoma State is 7. Texas Tech is 8. UCF is 8. West Virginia has 7. Now there's a few with quite a bit still. Texas 12, TCU 11, and I still think that there's 1 or 2 exits to come on a couple of those. Oklahoma 11. KU has 13, but it counts Johnny Furphy. Everyone knows he's going to the draft. Iowa State is 13. Houston is 14. So they got to get rid of somebody still. I don't know how that works. Cincinnati 13. So it's about split there. But you got to remember, some of those have a lot of guys because they also took 4 or 5 high schoolers. And, no offense to the Cincinnatis of the world or TCUs or the world, but if you take 4 or 5 high schoolers, you're basically taking 4 guys that aren't going to play for you or have no chance to play for you. Because true freshmen, we just saw it last year, hardly any are good enough to contribute in the new college basketball world right away.
Yeah. So the information from Parker, he also posted that on our Discord last night at patreon.com/3maw, and appreciate Parker pulling that, because somebody had actually asked me on the phone an hour before that called me last night, hey, how do we stack up with the rest of the Big 12? And I hadn't done the research in terms of open scholarships, so it's a good call out. While it can be comforting, it also tells you, though, DY, that there's a lot of schools that have a lot of spots to fill that are going to be out there competing with you to fill those spots with what's available in the portal currently. So there's going to be a lot of competition 4 guys. But I'm like you. I mean, look, it's just the nature of it at this point. And this staff, for the most part, after last offseason, retained most of their guys from the 2023 roster, right, going into this season. I mean, Marquise and Keontae, their eligibility was up, or Keontae elected to go pro. Ish Masood was a mutual understanding. He moved on, but there really wasn't anybody else that they lost via the portal last year. They retained everybody. So if people knew some of the asks that these guys have for themselves in terms of money and what they think of themselves in terms of the advice they're getting from some of these sleazeball handlers that are out there that don't have the best interest of the kid at heart, and they're lying and they're telling them stuff and they're arrogant about what they're telling them, and they're going to get a reality check. I mean, Arthur Kaluma is going to get a reality check here when he goes through the portal and the next month or so. Day-Day Ames is probably going to have a reality check as well. It was, I don't know if this was Day-Day Ames' mom, DY, that posted on Tim Fitzgerald's, I think it was his daily delivery video a couple days ago where Fitz spoke about Day-Day Ames transferring. I'll tell you what, it was a family member.
Yeah, I'm not sure who it was, but someone connected.
Yeah. If you read it, it's definitely connected to Day-Day. It seemed like a family member. I'm not going to say if it's his mom or anything. I don't know. It goes by the name Honeygram 9817. So we can't determine who that officially is. But she got defensive, and look, I get it. You defend your kids. What we had heard was Day-Day Ames essentially didn't want to compete because so many guys were being brought in terms of talented pieces. All right. They brought Caleb Battle in from Arkansas for a visit. Things seemed promising there. Brendan Housen committed. Doug McDaniel's obviously in the fold. He's a point guard. CJ Jones is a shooting guard. Battle's a shooting guard. Housen's a shooting guard. They can play the wing too, a little bit of versatility there. So it didn't make a lot of sense to me because Day-Day Ames was still the number 2 point guard and was going to have meaningful minutes. But the way that this individual basically framed it up is saying that it wasn't about competition in terms of way she led off her post, but then eventually it sure reads like it's about competition because she talks about how in these college basketball days, it's a player's advantage because they can leave schools, but should the family trust someone who brings in players immediately and plays them the most minutes? It's a long post. I won't read all of it, but essentially just outlining that, didn't like that other guys were being brought in. Look, if you're you want to play with good players. Good players should want to play with good players. They want to win. All right. You shouldn't be opposed to bringing in a little bit of competition or guys that are going to help the team. So that bothered me. And it brings me back to a quote from former Kansas State head coach Frank Martin when he was the head coach at South Carolina. This was a quote in 2017, but he said something very similar in a press conference I sat in back in 2011 or 12 when he was the head coach at Kansas State. And I quote, this is from Frank Martin back in 2017, quote, "You know what makes me sick to my stomach when I hear grown people say that kids have changed. Kids haven't changed. Kids don't know anything about anything. We've changed as adults. We demand less of kids. We expect less of kids. We make their lives easier instead of preparing them for what life is truly about. We're the ones that have changed," end quote. I feel like that resonates more now than ever. I think, these parents and handlers are in these kids' ears. And anytime a little adversity hits, they got one foot out the door. And it bothers me, and I hate it. I hope something changes on that front. I'm not sure it ever will. I also recognize that Kansas State is the beneficiary of some of these guys that are coming to K-State who may have gone through the same thing. But I hope that we get back to a point where kids are willing to compete. They're not checking out when anything, a little bit of adversity hits. They're not going out to bid every single year and just transferring because there's no continuity and it's not sustainable. So anyways, that's my soapbox. We can talk a little more hoops and then dive into football when we come back from break. But first, got to tell you about Home Field Apparel. Get over to homefieldapparel.com. Get the discount code 3MAW23 when you check out. Enter that at checkout. You'll score 15% off over 50 K-State items on their website, including numerous hoodies, T-shirts, hats, cool basketball warm-up top, button-up top, retro from 70s, 80s. That's awesome. John wants to get his hands on that. I do too. I'm going to probably do that. I'm going to get us some of those retro-looking hats that are on there. All the retro gear that you could want, they've got over at homefieldapparel.com. So go check them out. Support them as they support us on the show. Enter discount code 3MAW23 when you check out, and you will score 15% off. We'll be back to talk more K-State when we come back from break.
We appreciate you supporting KC Sports Network by listening to our podcast. You have helped us become the highest-ranked Chiefs podcast network in 2022 and 2023. And don't forget about our daily Substack newsletter, the best written analysis you can find on the Chiefs straight to your inbox every day. kcsn.substack.com.
Just a couple more things on basketball real quick, DY. One thing I wanted to note on the Data Ames front in regards to that post that I just talked about a minute ago. Data Ames played over 20 minutes per game this last year, and on the Bart Torvik eligible players chart that you pull that lists up the players that qualify for his chart in terms of highest offensive ratings, he was only like one of 8 freshmen on that chart because he played more minutes and had a higher usage than most of those freshmen. Jacoby Walter, I believe, was the only guard. I think Jizzle James of Cincinnati was the only other one too. So there were 3 guards on that chart that were true freshmen last year. Data Ames was one of them. He got plenty of playing time. So don't get it. Don't get that one. DY, what is Arthur Kaluma leaving due to this team looking forward? Is 5 spots too many to fill in your eyes? Is he somebody that you think is replaceable? 14 points, 7 rebounds a game last year for the Wildcats.
Yeah, it's interesting. I did a story on Arthur Kaluma that published yesterday, just before before it was announced that he was going to the transfer portal. And, I have my beefs a little bit with Kaluma's game. I think there were some holes that became more visible last year. And, the ball gets a little sticky in his hands. The real slow release, right? It takes a while for him to get a shot off. His turnover numbers were up last year, and his 2-point shooting was a bit down, and I think some of that had to do with poor shot selection. But on the flip side, he shot the ball better from the 3-point line. He averaged more assists. He averaged more rebounds. He averaged more steals. He played more minutes. He scored more. He got to the free throw line more, and he shot better from the charity stripe. So, as uncomfortable as it felt sometimes with his performance, he still got better in a number of categories. And some of that, and I'm talking about per game. So some of that wasn't just based on playing more minutes either. Although I'm sure that at some point that becomes a contributing factor as well. Is he replaceable? Yeah, but there's still guys out there that I think can do what he does. And a number of guys, but like I just shared, look at the number of teams in the Big 12. It's still going to be doing the same thing. So we'll see. Yeah, it's funny that we have to talk in this way, but there is a supply and demand element, and I think that's going to come into play at some point as well. 5 spots seems like a challenge, maybe not untenable, but it does seem like a challenge. This staff has kind of overcame the odds out, not all the time, because last year wasn't what they wanted it to be, but many times where it seems like their backs against the wall and we give up hope and people kind of give up on what they're capable of is when they kind of pull something out. I think last year, now obviously the season didn't go the way that they wanted it to, but I don't think they got their first transfer commit until the month of May, I want to say, with Tyler Perry. And then, everyone was down to the dumps, and then they beat out Alabama and Kentucky for Arthur Kaluma. And they did that when they didn't really have any money. Now, I know more teams have money now, but I just hesitate on counting out these guys just because it seems like right when you do, they prove to you that you shouldn't. So, and I guess as evidence of that, they have 5 spots left. Conversations that I had recently, it would suggest to me that, they're definitely right there and in the game. And 2 that I think that they're probably in the best situation with. Now, this is no guarantee that they're going to get them. I don't want people to construe it that way, but I think like Khalif Battle, the transfer from Arkansas, and Baba Miller, transfer from Florida State, would be the 2 that I feel the best about. Not a guarantee they'll get them, but the 2 I feel the best about as we stand here today.
I think it's probably between FAU and Kansas State for Baba Miller, and we'll see when that comes out. Yeah,
No
what he
Wake
makes
Forest.
Yeah, no, I don't. Yeah, he took official visit to Wake too this last weekend, but it seems like they're probably third in the running. So it's going to come down to two former Baylor assistants, Jerome Tang versus John Jacobs, the head coach of FAU, the first year head coach with the Owls, and then battle. We'll see. We know K-State felt pretty good about that one, but it continues to drag out. We don't have a public announcement yet on a commitment, so hopefully that comes in the near future. If they were to land one of those guys, they would have, well, let's just say they land both and they got 3 spots left. I think the important thing to note is they don't need 5 studs to fill those 5 spots. 2 or 3 of those guys can be role guys as long as they get 2 dudes. They probably need 2 more dudes to go alongside Doug McDaniel and then the other guys they landed like CJ Jones and Brendan Howson. So David Gasson also, just by the way, officially announced his return via a neat video yesterday on April 30th that he is returning for one more season at Kansas State. Don't want that to get lost in the shuffle.
And he's a star in his role, so I don't think that should be discounted. David Gasson, just for what he is asked to do and how good he is at doing it, he is a dude, in my opinion. Doug McDaniel is a dude. And I know that I'm kind of out on a limb in this a little bit, and maybe I'll get proven wrong, but there's a part of me that thinks we're not too far from CJ Jones also being a dude.
Yes. Yeah. And just to bring everyone up to speed on Clifford Amore's recruitment, he did indeed take an official visit to Alabama. That is concluded. Alabama fans felt confident at one point, but surprise, surprise, he's going to continue to take another visit. And that's the way his recruitment has gone. So it sounds like he will go to North Carolina on Thursday, and he is saying that will be his last official visit, and he will choose at that point. So probably going to come down to Alabama, North Carolina, K-State, and Georgetown. Those are the 4 schools he visited, but got to tell you, I don't feel overly optimistic about that one.
Today is North Carolina, just because they're getting Big Cliff on campus beginning on Thursday. Truth be told, I kind of was fond of North Carolina growing up a little bit just because I hated Duke that much and the Jordan Association. I'm a big Michael Jordan guy. So anyway, I don't think Kansas State's out. But I'm probably, my confidence has faded some in the last 24 hours.
Yeah, I don't feel overly optimistic about that one. Look, I'd rather him go to North Carolina than Alabama because I don't like Nate Oates. So, yeah, if I have a choice, I'll choose him going to North Carolina, at least, and stomaching that recruiting loss. But either way, there are not a ton of good 5s or talented 5s in the portal. So they're going to figure something out there if Amore chooses one of the other schools. We'll see if anyone else enters up until the deadline today to enter the transfer portal. All right.
And I know that it just feels like going glass half full here and trying to spin zone, but bigs do progress and develop slowly. Arkansas was a shit show, we know. You would think you're going to get a little bit out of Bayfall. Maybe it's more than that. But like bigs, you know what E. Missy did last year at Baylor is a rare exception, right? Bigs usually don't pop up and emerge until later. Like it takes them even longer. I don't know if there was E. Missy the only freshman 5 that did anything last year. Probably. Because there was only like 10 freshmen that did anything, right? In general. So, and Missy at his growing pains, as our producer Nick pointed out. I mean, he also lost a game almost single-handedly late. Was it the Houston game?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, those guys they'll make you pull your hair out. So, Bayfall is still a guy that it wouldn't shock me. You get to his 3rd, 4th year of college, he's a really good player. I think the possibility of that is still there, and it could start right now in year 2. And if David Gasson is playing a lot of minutes at the 5, I don't know that that's worst case scenario. I really wouldn't say it is. We've seen him play the 5 at K-State. We've seen him play the 4 at K-State. I know he would probably rather his role expand a little bit, just like he did last year, and play with the ball in his hands a bit more. Everybody wants that. But having seen David Gasson at the 5, having seen David Gasson at the 4, at least in college basketball, he is better at the 5. He really is. Now, he needs a point guard to get him in good spots and everything like that. That's why he succeeded so much with Marquise Noel. And he probably needs a forward that can kind of stretch the floor and be dangerous as well. That's why he succeeded so much next to Naquan Tomlin, which makes, the Baba Miller addition maybe fruitful in that area, where it may take a little bit off the burden off the 5 if you can't really get, the guys that they were chasing at one point, right? A Nick Pringle, a Numar Ballo, or a Clifford Amori.
No, that's what I was going to say. I mean, look, as you said, they went to the Elite 8 with David Gasson at the 5. He was their starting 5. Bebe Igiola was his backup. You can see a path to doing that again if you land a versatile 4 like a Baba Miller, which may be the priority at that point. If you don't think there's any great 5s out there, Bay Fall takes the role of Bebe Igiola, and then Dave Gasson primarily plays the 5, Baba is the 4, and then you surround him with talent on the wing and on the guard position like a Battle and somebody else and get some other dudes there, and you can make it work. I mean, and if there is a position in basketball that, like the 5 spot, I think you can survive a little bit more with a guy that's not like just this dominant stud. And
David Gasson, if you put him at the 5, he can defend the pick and roll. Yeah. That's really what you need.
Yeah, elite defender. I really like David Gasson, and I think he'll take another jump and hopefully be healthy this next season as he battled through it.
To be fair, I know he doesn't want to play 35 minutes at the 5, and I get it.
Yeah. Okay, well, we'll have more hoop stuff for you guys. It's going to be very active. There's going to be plenty of content on 3MAW over the coming weeks with those 5 spots to fill. We'll have frequent updates for you, so be on the lookout on the feed. Subscribe to the feed if you haven't already. Rate us, if you could, on Apple or Spotify. Leave us a review. We'd appreciate it. And hit like or subscribe to the YouTube videos and at KCSNU at KCSN on the YouTube channel. So, all right. Football front, DY, on the positive here. Alex Marenko chooses Kansas State. Yeah, they are. What is that, 5 commits in 5 days now? Between
well, you talked on basketball with Bayfall and Brendan Housen.
Got it.
Bayfall, Brendan Housen, and then whatever the football ones were, high school linebacker Weston Polk, linebacker Alec Marenko, running back transfer Dylan Edwards. So there's your 5 and 5 with Brendan Housen and Bayfall. You counted 6 and 5 too because they got the recommitment of Malcolm Alcorn Crowder.
Big time. I mean, they have knocked out 2 big positions of need in the last really yesterday alone, on Tuesday alone. They got Malcolm Alcorn Crowder back in the mix. This is a guy that signed in the winter to be part of the 24 recruiting class at Kansas State. Incoming player, junior college player from Butler County Community College, 6'6", nearly 300 pounds, can play D-end, can also play nose tackle, so he can be kind of a Swiss Army knife up front. And we know K-State needed another nose tackle. Alcorn Crowder didn't look like he was going to make it, re-entered the portal, and then lands back at K-State. He announces it yesterday, something that you had actually heard, DY, a few days ago as a possibility. They get him back in the mix. How do you feel now about defensive line, especially nose tackle, with him in the fold? Keeping in mind, I mean, Malcolm Alcorn Crowder, guys, is the number 8 player, JUCO player, and number 1 defensive lineman in the On3 industry consensus in the 24 recruiting class, and On3 specifically had him as the number 4 ranked junior college player in the country. Big time ad.
Yeah, feel better. Maybe not 100% there yet. Part of that is because is Malcolm Alcorn Crowder suited to play nose tackle? I think he probably is. You mentioned he could play DN too. I think at one point that was maybe the calculus. I just don't know if they can make that make sense anymore, because you play him at DN, you get even more crowded there, and then you're probably asking for a disaster after the season in terms of trying to keep everybody happy. And that's too many good DNs. I don't want those guys to leave. You know what I mean? I know they can't now. We're past that portal deadline, but I still think you got to keep December in mind a little bit when the transfer portal opens back up and those guys are like, well, you didn't trust me this past year. So I think Alcorn Crowder has to play in the middle of the defensive line. I think he can. But it'll be interesting to see how effective he is in that role, assuming that's going to be the route they take. One, because he might be more of that 3-4 DN, but maybe he could play 3-4 D tackle in college and get by. But you probably would have liked him to get those spring ball reps too that he didn't get because it took him so long to qualify. But getting him is better than not getting him. They need to fast forward his stuff between the years and what they expect of him once fall camp gets over the summer. They need to get him up to speed. They need to basically try to make up for what didn't happen in January, February, March, and April in a short amount of time. And we'll see if that's doable. Part of the reason why I still think they'll go forward with that visit with Carlos Allen of Kennesaw State next weekend.
That's what I was going to ask you next on Carlos Allen. And it does take junior college players often a little bit more time to transition to this level. So it could take half a season. Maybe he comes on later in the year. But yeah, I think the priority for him would be at nose tackle with the depth that they have at defensive end. And let's be honest, he's a better build than Javon Banks, who was kind of used as that third nose tackle that came in last year as a pass rushing specialist. I mean, Crowder's got
I got a feeling Damian Leo might start to turn into a little bit of a dude.
I agree. Yeah, and you mentioned Carlos Allen. He's down to 4 schools: Cal, Houston, K-State, and Georgia Southern. 6'1", 303-pound grad transfer, 35 tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss, and a forced fumble over the past 2 seasons. Slated to visit K-State the weekend of May 10th. You think he's slated to go to Houston this weekend, May 3rd through the 5th? Probably your biggest competition. I know Houston fans really want him. They need guys there. It'll be interesting in case they can sell him on nose tackle, knowing he won't be probably the starter here, or there's so much depth at this point on the defensive line. We'll see what happens there, but I agree. I think they should still bring him in for a visit. Okay, the other significant news, and we talked about Elijah Herring because he was the sexy name over the weekend, right? When he took a visit to Kansas State, transfer linebacker from Tennessee, led the balls and tackles with 80 last season. Anytime you see an SEC linebacker, especially on a team that won 9-10 games, lead a team in tackles, and you think you might be able to get him in the portal, you get excited. But Kansas State elected to actually take Alex Marenko, a linebacker Alec Marenko, I'm sorry. Alec Marenko, 6'3", 229-pound linebacker from New Mexico, transfer from there. Somebody that K-State has actually recruited for quite some time. The Herring recruitment was pretty quick and rapid to get him on campus. They've been on Marenko for a long time, and he commits to Kansas State on Tuesday evening. He's a middle linebacker, a very experienced player, led the Lobos in tackles last year with 66, 3.5 tackles for loss, was their defensive MVP, battled through some injuries, started 10 of 12 games. K-State really likes him, DY. Significant of this ad, and what do you make of this one?
It was a position of great need. I think it was probably the only spot on the field on either side of the ball where you felt uneasy about the starting position because of the departure of J.J. Clifton. So I think you kind of sew that up with an experienced player that knows how to play college football, that's not going to back down from anything, and will probably be able to, even though he missed spring ball, get up to speed pretty quickly with the defense because of all that experience and football intellect that he carries. And yeah, great position in need. You've basically added another dynamite weapon on the offensive side of the ball and filled, to an extent, your two biggest positions of need at the interior of the defensive line, which you're probably not done yet, but you got one, and then middle linebacker. So it's been a great month of April. Now today's the first day of May for the Kansas State football program. And, between Marenko and Herring, I think a lot of it had to do with them believing that it was more of Marenko was more of a fit for what their culture is, a guy that reflects what they want in a football player, off the field in terms of work hard, bust your ass, stuff like that. But I think they thought that was probably night and day between him and Herring. And then what they do on the field, pretty similar. So I thought it was, they probably thought it was an easy slam dunk to pick between the two. But had some injury stuff a little bit. Marenko played through his last year. And still became the leading tackler at New Mexico despite missing 3 games and being hobbled a bit. I think he's 100% now. Herring, I don't think had really any injuries that he dealt with through the season. I think he actually filled in for the starter at Tennessee that got hurt, and then became the leading tackler at Tennessee, kind of known for not being a great guy in space. But if you're going to play on the inside, you have to do that a little bit less. That probably wasn't a great concern. But someone that I believe just had surgery not long ago, maybe stemming from something that happened during the season or stemming from something that happened in spring ball. I was going to miss part of fall camp, and I'm sure that contributed to the decision of who to take as well. So, I don't know if I call Alec Marenko a home run. I could be proven wrong with the way he plays, right, this upcoming year. But I think he checks a lot of boxes off and gets you your defense from an uneasy standpoint, just because the middle is so important, to now you feel, I would say, solid. Is that a good way to put it?
Yeah, I was going to say it's a really solid addition. I mean, I think you've checked the two biggest boxes you need on the defensive side of the football. Again, they'd like another nose tackle. They'd like another linebacker, probably on the edge, just to give them some insurance with Asa Newsome coming off the ACL as well. So we'll see if they land another outside linebacker. But the top priority was middle linebacker to go alongside Austin Romaine in the middle there, and then nose tackle to get Alcorn Crowder back in the fold. So now you can really be a little bit more picky and choosy with who you're going after in the portal. I think it's a really solid piece. And the reason we didn't talk a lot about Marenko recently, DY, and we focused on Herring, was also partially because I think we all thought Marenko was likely a lean to Arizona.
That's another part of it that I wanted. That's the part I was like, I know I wanted to say something and didn't. It's the fact like that it didn't seem like this should be a recruitment that Kansas State would win, right? Me and you have said it all along. He's close to Arizona. He lives in El Paso, despite playing in New Mexico. He lives in El Paso, just played in New Mexico, also close to Tucson. He could get to Tucson by driving, I think, from El Paso to Tucson. I don't think that's too far of a hike. I think one of his former high school coaches is on the Arizona football staff. He just went to the Arizona spring game. They got the last shot at him. This past weekend, he was in Tucson for their spring game. Everything was designed for him to be an Arizona Wildcat. Instead, he picks the Kansas State Wildcats. I know you want to give some takes on that, but that's, regardless of, because I view these things different, regardless if he does anything great on the field or not, that's an impressive recruiting win.
Well, I mean, his former head coach in New Mexico, Danny Gonzalez, is the linebackers coach at Arizona now. So everybody thought it was a slam dunk. Danny Gonzalez, first year as a linebackers coach, he spent 4 seasons as the head coach in New Mexico, 3 with Marenko, and he's from El Paso, as you mentioned, which is 4 hours from Tucson, where Arizona is located. So, yeah, it's a huge win for Kansas State. Marenko was also a guy that he canceled a visit on Auburn, reportedly. Auburn wanted in on him. There were a couple other Big Ten, SEC schools that were interested in him that he didn't visit, and the Wildcats land him, and hopefully he has a healthy season. We know he's tough as nails, because he battled through some injuries this past season. He tore his ACL in 2022, came back and led New Mexico in tackles with 66 last year. So, like the addition there. Now, as we look at the big picture, DY, to wrap this up, they've landed the middle linebacker. They've landed the dynamic running back as your number 2 that you needed in Dylan Edwards, and got a nose tackle in the fold. What are the remaining priorities for Kansas State via the transfer portal that you want them to address?
I don't know. Okay, probably a backup quarterback that's had some experience, because it seems weird, but Avery Johnson hasn't started a game at quarterback in his entire career in a regular season. The only one being the Pop-Tarts Bowl. And he's also the most experienced quarterback on the Kansas State roster. A little scary. So I think you want to get that. Besides that, I know there's areas where they're still examining. They hosted an offensive line visitor on Andrew Chambly, the transfer from Arkansas. I just personally, besides the backup quarterback, I'm not saying they shouldn't go get other people, especially now, because you can't really lose anyone else, right?
Yep.
So you don't have that fear. But I guess I don't see like a glaring need besides backup quarterback, personally.
Yeah. We know, though, that I think we probably view an offensive lineman as a luxury ad, but they seem to really want one. And so we'll see if they're able to address that. With Chambly, another guy that entered the portal just yesterday that you flagged for us, DY, was Michigan State offensive lineman Ethan Boyd, who they recruited out of high school. So
I think they recruited him out of high school, and when he entered the portal, or Did he enter the portal last time?
He entered in the winter and then went back to Michigan State.
Yeah, I think he looked at him then probably too. Look, and when it comes to offensive tackle, I'll just put it this way. I think, or offensive line, I think they're just looking for extra insurance. Because injuries happen. You want a guy that you could be able to count on if something happens. Because, Carver Willis was pretty good last year, but this will be his first full year as potentially a starter. These jobs are probably still up for grabs. Easton Kilty hasn't played at the Power 5 level yet, or Power 4 level yet. So you got that. You got Sam Hatch as a first-year center, potentially. You got John Pastore and Andrew Linegang. Both have dealt with some health and injury stuff throughout their careers, and it's kind of contributed to them not fully being inserted into the rotation just yet. So I think they just wanted insurance. At the end of the day, all those guys I just said, though, they really, really like.
Yeah. Well, they're going to get in a situation hopefully soon where they can be really picky with the few scholarships they have left and just take best player available. If there's just somebody they can't turn down, and they don't have to worry about it chasing somebody off in the portal because the portal window will have been closed by then. So just go land the best talent that you can, build as much depth as you can. We know they feel good about corner, but if a hit corner or safety pops in the portal, today, or somebody that they has interest in them, they really like, go get them. Go take a shot at them. So some really good news on the football front. Really feeling good about the direction that's headed, and can't wait for the season to get here. And look, I'm sure the K-State basketball staff has a plan in place, and they'll be moving forward with some key guys here in the near future and lock down some commitments. So we'll keep you abreast of all of that going on. Stay tuned to 3MAW on the feed. Again, like, subscribe if you haven't. That helps us. Leave a review if you haven't done so before. Go check us out on patreon.com/3MAW for $5 a month. You can get some bonus content on top of all the things we do here at KCSN. Appreciate you all. Appreciate our sponsors, Home Field Apparel. Go to homefieldapparel.com, score 15% off a discount code 3MAW23, and go over to Holiday Distillery or go to your local liquor store and pick up a bottle of Ben Holiday bottled in Von Bourbon or 360 vodka and support them as they support us on 3MAW. For Derek Young, I'm Cole Manbeck, and Nick Springer behind the scenes. Appreciate him as always. Thanks for listening to another episode of 3MAW.